All right, it is early Monday morning. You might be able to hear it in my voice. We're still waking up. I'm still getting the coffee going, but I'm here with Nicholas MajinTenshinhan Taylor, who has been running our Capcom Cup coverage all week long because Capcom Cup was 8 days this week. Hot damn, between the action that we saw, the announcements that we got, this has actually been a very successful, exciting, and energizing weekend for Street Fighter. The next Capcom Cup will be a $2 million endeavor, the most that we've ever seen for a fighting game. The winner of this Capcom Cup will be walking away with $1 million minus taxes, but no one ever wants to talk about that. This is a huge new mile marker for the fighting game community. Nick, what are your reactions to this?
Man, seeing that was honestly overwhelming because, you know, it came right after Menardi winning the whole thing, and he said, you know, thanks to fighting games, I got to see the world. And that just puts it in perspective. Like, a lot of people, they get into these fighting games because it's a hobby, and then they get better, they get the opportunity to start competing, and then they get to something like Capcom Cup, and, you know, they get this huge opportunity. Menardi sees that in 2017, won the whole thing, and he's used that to, you know, strengthen his community over in the Dominican Republic, but also, you know, develop himself as a player and as a person.
Yes, all of these things. It's created opportunities for him that I don't think we would have seen otherwise. And it starts with him winning the Capcom Cup for the first time, you know, clawing up to the top, and then making something of that. And now he's the only two-time Capcom Cup champion that we've got thus far,
which is a crazy title to have. And if you talked about this, I don't know, 10 years ago, and you would say, like, yeah, there's going to be this huge circuit, you know, it's going to be extremely competitive, there's all this money on the line, and there's going to be a two-time champ, everyone would have said, oh, well, it's Daigo, right? Or something like that, you know, oh, it's a Japanese player, maybe Justin Wong. Nobody would be thinking that this, not anymore, but at the time, kid from the Dominican Republic would be winning Capcom Cup twice. He did. And now we're seeing Capcom Cup grow so much bigger that whoever is able to win next year is going to get like 10 times that opportunity, basically. It's unthinkable. You know, people always ask what we do with $1 million. I mean, that's going to be the reality for someone here.
Mm-hmm. Minus taxes.
Someone who just picked up fighting games.
That changes the scene for fighting games. And for so long, if you've been in the fighting game community and been talking about eSports and comparing it to other genres, we're always saying the fighting game community is behind in terms of this competitive, audience-based sort of presentation. That chasm is still there. I think it was like Dota had $1 million prize pool like some 10 years ago for their major, but we're creeping on up now and closing that gap up. And I think that has huge implications, not only for the potential for players, as we just talked about, but now, like, are we going to be seeing more sponsors? Maybe we won't even be on ESPN2. We'll get to ESPN1 this time. I think that fighting games are going to be more in the public eye than they ever have before because, hey, at the end of the day, money talks.
100%. We already saw a big push with Street Fighter V to, you know, bring more money and more brands and whatever into the scene. We had like E-League, for example, which was a very big endeavor, a lot of money on the line back then. And this is growing even more now. So I think we are definitely going to see a huge boom in public awareness, but also in sponsors and such that will be associated with the brand, because this is Capcom putting up this money, as far as I'm aware. You know, when you look at other sports, when you look at like NASCAR or whatever, the cars are completely decked out with 1 million sponsors, right? Because they put up the money and then sponsors get interested because there's money in there, and, you know, that leads to way bigger money. So I think this is just the starting point of what we're going to see coming in the next few years.
You know, and I think Capcom tried that. Was it in 2018 when they rolled out the sponsorship costumes in Street Fighter V, where every character had basically their standard costume, but you could throw a logo. And that felt more like a prototype. And I think we were at a place where, you know, sponsors weren't rushing to deck out Ryu and make him look like a, you know, Jeff Gordon's car. Does that date me a little bit? No one knows NASCAR references here anyway. But the point is, I don't think that the fighting game space was quite ready, or the advertisers weren't ready to come into it yet. With the way Street Fighter 6 is being set up to appeal to so many, all of these weird little like mishaps and errors and whatnot that went on in previous games seem to be like they are rectified now for Street Fighter 6 to a decent degree, and perhaps most importantly, we are thus far seeing an online that can really make the game valid to play, like, you know, from country to country, or at least across a big country. With that in place, I think now we're at a spot where all of this can come together and actually work, plus ESPN1.
Yeah, 100% agree. I think this has been a very long time in the making from Capcom's side, and we're kind of seeing the actual start now. Everything before this has been the lead up, and now we're going to be seeing the start. This is, all right, to throw out a pop culture reference, this is the Avengers, right? This is the start of what would become the monster that was later the MCU for Capcom. Is what I feel like.
That immediately takes me to, like, oh no, it's gonna have a horrible dark turn in Phase 4, but we're not there yet. We'll have fun.
Everything does.
Yeah. Live long enough to see yourself.
Wait for Street Fighter 8 for that.
So, does this mean anything for the larger fighting game community, as far as you can see? I know this is all just bouncing around for the first time, and we're sort of trying to digest it.
100%, yeah. I know, you know, some people don't necessarily like a particular Street Fighter, or maybe they don't agree with certain Capcom decisions, but it would be hard to not say that they were the trendsetters in a lot of things that we're seeing right now. I will give a quick shout out to Killer Instinct, because Killer Instinct kind of started the seasonal structure and all stuff like that, and they were also like progenitors of the rollback netcode standard and everything. But if we're looking at the tournament standard, I think Capcom has really formed something that other companies are following, because we saw the Capcom Pro Tour very early on. I don't even remember when we started with it. It was in the middle of Street Fighter 4 sometime. It was like 2011, something like that. And since then, we've obviously seen, you know, we have the Tekken World Tour, we have the Dragon Ball FighterZ World Tour, we have the Arc Revo World Tour. All these different games are following suit because they see this is something that works, and we also want to do it. So when these other companies are also doing it, you know, Bandai Namco, ArcSys, then obviously they need to stay competitive, because while I don't think the fighting game community is a community, you know, everyone gets along to a certain extent at least, and I think it's the same with the fighting game companies, which is why we saw these presentations of, you know, the fighting game creators coming together, but they're also rivals, 100%. So, you know, this is a big incentive for Bandai Namco to push for more money in Tekken, right? And the same for every other game, like with Dragon Ball FighterZ, you know, whatever comes next for that game, and same with like ArcSys for Guilty Gear Strive. All these fighting games, the new fighting games that are going to come out as well, you know, SNK need to push some kind of tour probably if they want King of Fighters 15 to stay at the forefront of people's minds. All of this stuff is something that we keep seeing, and with Capcom upping the ante, the others have to follow suit.
I think it's something of a, well, it's competitive, of course, but it's also a rising tide carries all ships. And before I forget really quick, I think the first Pro Tour was officially back in 2013, the Sako one, where Sako won it all. And that
Right.
was with Street Fighter 4. And this actually ties nicely back to Street Fighter 4, because it was Capcom that rolled out Street Fighter 4 in 2008, 2009. And while that's not the only game that's responsible for the boom that we saw in competitive fighting games, it certainly sent us into, it played a huge role in sending us into a golden age where we saw a lot of other franchises that were still around. You know, Mortal Kombat and Tekken and such, they never really went away when Street Fighter did between Street Fighter 3 and 4. But when it came back, and it did what it did with Street Fighter 4 for the competitive scene, we got, you know, Mortal Kombat was right there jumping in and being part of those major events. You know, you think about a Street Fighter 4 Evo and what those were like, and how many other games got to jump in and then contribute majorly. You know, Marvel vs. Capcom, at least in the US, became, I think, bigger for a little while than even Street Fighter 4. But you saw that kind of a thing happen before. I think we're going to see something similar now, again with Capcom making this big first move, because even though they've definitely seen their competition rise up and in some very obvious ways overtake them, Street Fighter, for all intents and purposes, has been the torchbearer for fighting games. And it's sort of coming back to it here. It's had a very rocky, you know, couple of chapters and whatnot, but it seems like they're returning to form and they are exploring new territory. And like you say, yes, absolutely, everybody else is going to be following in suit or is already doing something similar.
Yeah, 100% agree. And I think the boom we saw with Street Fighter 4, which you mentioned, and I think everyone who was around back then remembers, a lot of us got into the scene with Street Fighter 4. You know, I played fighting games, but I got into it with Street Fighter 4. I believe the same thing. Yeah, exactly, same for you. I think we're going to see that in a big way with Street Fighter 6. They're pushing very hard to bring a lot of players in, and they still have a very solid base. And I think they're upping the ante here with Capcom Cup, and the positive reception around Street Fighter 6, we've seen it all across the board, right? So many positive reactions to the beta and the game in general. I think with Street Fighter 6, you are going to see another renaissance, even though fighting games haven't been in that like dire straits that they were. Yeah, I think Street Fighter 6 is going to be massive because of that, and Capcom Cup is gonna, as you said, raise all ships.
In all aspects, right? All them ships. And the Pro Tour has been sort of recalibrated in certain ways. They've been learning and growing with that and trying certain things and realizing, this doesn't work so well and that doesn't work so well. And they're, God bless them, they're working on the global stage, trying to give opportunities all over the place. And what you were saying earlier about, the kid from the Dominican Republic has now gone from one path that might have been to this whole other path, and he's the 2-time Capcom Cup champion, and who knows, maybe he'll be the 3-time next year and have an extra $1 million minus taxes in his pocket, and that would be really cool too. But the Pro Tour has updated and made a lot of these opportunities possible.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing that was criticized but also praised with this year's Capcom Cup was the fact that we had so many different regions represented. The reason it was criticized was because Japan, for example, which is a very dominant region in Street Fighter, only had 2 qualifiers. But something that was praised was that we saw a bunch of people that we wouldn't have seen otherwise. We had, for example, Jabi M and Ren from South Africa. We had Mirkin from Poland. We had Kalmal09, which I think was from Bulgaria, if I remember correctly. We had all these players who we probably wouldn't have seen under normal circumstances. And any of these players could have been the next MenRD, because I believe that MenRD got his opportunity because there started being tournaments held in the Dominican Republic that were part of the Capcom Pro Tour, which let MenRD, punch his ticket to get some CPT points, to get some money, to travel to more events, and then get into the Capcom Cup 2017. And then once there, he was able to, go the whole mile and finish off strong, which led to the MenRD we see today. And there are so many people across the world who might just be the next MenRD, but they're from a region or from a country where they don't have the opportunity to go to, CEO or Evo Japan or, Head Stomper, Brussels Challenge, like all these big tournaments that might just not be accessible to them. So the fact that Capcom in their trailer, they highlighted online premieres as well as offline premieres, which means that I think that they're going to keep the regional structure from this year, and or last year I should say, and try and get as many regions represented as possible, which I think is a positive, as long as you can balance that with also having a healthy amount of offline premieres, meaning that we also get to see the best players that we're aware of as well, because there were a bunch of players people were wanting to see that weren't here now because of the structure, like Gachikun fell in the last chance qualifier, for example, but even players that didn't even show up, like Daigo, Fudo, Bonchan, players that are like mainstays, but their only shot was the last chance qualifier, and they
didn't want to bet it, which is understandable. They're like, I don't want to go face that many Lukes in a row. It's just that I don't have the mental fortitude. I really like exploring the world and finding out new superpowers for Street Fighter, like we have here. And if it comes at the cost of you can't have all of the Japanese gods be in every top 8, I'm happy to see new blood. I'm happy to see new players rise up. And I think if we're going in this esports direction, we want a variety of names. And Capcom has been setting that up with things like the Street Fighter League. They've really been, as I think back on it, getting us ready and priming this. And I think that if all of the ducks are in the row, as they seem to be, we could really be seeing a boom, some new heights. I'm excited just talking about it and coming to the realization here in real time of what this could potentially be. Good times ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. We don't have that many details yet on the upcoming Capcom Pro Tour, but I think that is what they're going to do, is try and find this balance between the two. We had a restricted Capcom Pro Tour because of the pandemic. We had online events for the last few years. That's not going to be the case anymore. Well, we are going to have online events, but we're going to have offline events as well. The only offline event that was relevant to the Capcom Pro Tour this year, or last year I should say, was EVO. This year, we're probably going to see a lot more of that. I think there are going to be a handful where the top players can go and they can qualify, but then you also have these regional online events. Hopefully, they will be as widespread as they were in the last season that just ended, because then we can see this really come to fruition. And, you know, if it means that we're going to have another 8-day Capcom Cup, I'm fine with that, because I remember a few years ago, I don't remember exactly which year it was, but I remember they were going to stream only some matches from Capcom Cup, and people were mad. They were super angry, which I understand, because that makes no sense. And then they streamed everything instead, and now we're seeing like an extension of that. We got to see everything on stream, every single match, including the Street Fighter League finals and everything. And you know, if Capcom Cup is going to be that big of an extravaganza and it's going to be 8 days and whatever, that's fine with me, if it means that we're going to get the representation of the best players and also a big regional variety, so we can see these storylines unfold. It's kind of like the Snyder Cut of Justice League. It's way too long, but there's a lot of good stuff in there. You know what I mean?
Oh man, this is getting more controversial by the word. I'm surprised that I'm widely okay with an 8-day Capcom Cup. When I first heard that, I was thinking, there's no way anyone's going to go to that. No one in the FGC could just take 8 days off and go do that or spend their time. It worked out better than I thought it would. Maybe that's the way of doing it from now on, and maybe they can justify it with how much money's flowing through things. We'll see. But again, it's like I see some pretty bright skies ahead, and that's really encouraging right now.
Yeah, I think the incentive to, you know, get 8 days off is a lot bigger when $1 million is on the line.
I couldn't even get EventHubs to give me 8 days off for it, and they're you know, they know what's going on. So, no, just kidding. But no, so Nick, anything else to say about the craziness and the evolution that's going on with Capcom Cup and the fact that millions of dollars will now be tossed around in the fighting game community this coming year? And
the future's bright, man. That's all I got. Like, I'm looking forward to seeing it. I'm looking forward to working it, because, you know, I cover the tournaments here. I'm looking forward to playing in it.
Dude, I know. Oh my gosh. Street Fighter 6, come out. Let's go. All right, guys. We'd love to hear what you think of all this as we process it, chew on it, get ready for it. Do you think it's going to fly? Obviously not without a hitch, but do you think this is going to come together enough that we can really get to that next level with competitive Street Fighter and competitive fighting games in the bigger picture? Hit us up in the comments, like, subscribe, you know, all that stuff. And thank you so much for watching. Nick, thank you for contributing here and holding down the fort for us, covering all of Capcom Cup. If you guys haven't seen all of the detailed results, we have it all on the front page, and we'll link it to you in this video description below. All of your Street Fighter and fighting game news and action, EventHubs. Nick, anything else?
Thanks as always for having me on, and play Grand Blue and Street Fighter 6.
Fair enough. See you guys.